Paul Krugman of the New York Times weighing in on why the Bush tax cuts should not be extended. It's our quote of the day. Krugman says, according to analysis prepared by the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, quote, the majority of the tax cuts would go to the richest 0.1%. Meantime, this headline in the New Yorker magazine also caught our eye. Soak the very, very rich. Columnist James Surowiecki advocating more tax brackets so that the super wealthy pay higher taxes. So is soaking the rich, the very rich, the answer?
Well, opposing views now from Michael Linden, he's with the Center for American Progress, and Dan Mitchell at the CATO Institute. Gentlemen, welcome. I guess I'm going to start with you, Dan. Is there a problem with targeting people's income as though they are a deep pocket for the government to continue spending, as noble as their programs may be? Or is the fact that somebody who makes $25 million being taxed roughly the same as somebody who makes $500 million something we need to correct?
I'm almost tempted to say, go ahead, tax George Soros and Barbara Streisand and the rest of Michael's ultra-wealthy liberal friends at a higher rate. But then I get a hold of myself and I realize it's not just punishing the dilettantes like that. You'd also be punishing investors and entrepreneurs. We want more growth in this economy, and punishing people who can contribute a lot to the economy is not a good idea, especially when the entire fiscal problem we have has nothing to do with taxes. It's all because government spending under both Bush and Obama has skyrocketed. That's the problem. Don't feed the politicians by giving them more tax revenue.
Well, Michael, you just heard what Dan said. Is bringing the top down going to truly help the bottom end, or should we be working more directly to raise the bottom up? What are your thoughts?
Well, I was chatting with my good friends Barbara and George the other day, and they were saying it doesn't really make sense that somebody making $500,000 pays the exact same marginal tax rate on their last dollar of earnings as somebody making $10 million or $50 million. In fact, the richest 400 Americans in 2007 made an average of $138 million in 1 year, and they paid an effective tax rate that was lower than most people who were making about $150,000 to $200,000. That just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Dan? What's your response?
Michael's wrong on that, because he's looking at dividends and capital gains and saying, oh my goodness, they're only paying a 15% rate on that income. But that's all double taxation, because that income's already been taxed one time.
No, Dan. Sorry, Dan, you're wrong about that. I was talking about effective tax rates. That's the total amount of tax they pay divided by the total income. It's a standard statistic.
But that's because capital gains and dividends are a big chunk of their income.
Dan, if we stop spending, Dan, today, if we stop spending today, we would still have huge debt and huge interest payments on that debt. We've got to go get money from somewhere.
That's exactly right.
Don't you go and get the money from the people who have the money?
No, but here's your point. If we stop spending today, if we just froze government spending at fiscal year 2010 levels, we would have a budget surplus in 2016, and our debt would rapidly begin to decline after that as a share of GDP. So let's actually address the real problem. Raising taxes is like giving alcoholics the keys to a liquor store in Washington. It would send exactly the wrong message. We don't want to copy France and Greece, and I disagree with Michael about that.
Michael, does the whole system need to be reworked? Is it crazy to even discuss this when you look at how tall tax codes are? It would go past the ceiling. Is this just adding another 3 feet to the top of the empire of crazy paperwork that we call the U.S. tax code?
Well, I do think the tax code does need some fundamental reform, but I think that reform could include new tax brackets at the very top. Look, the people who are going to be affected by this, they pay very high-priced accountants. They can afford it. It's not a big deal for them to fill out their tax returns with a slightly higher rate at the top. And again, we're not talking about crazy things here. 1 or 2 points at the top isn't going to make a big difference to them.
It's not going to make a big difference to you unless you're the person paying it.
It's going to make a big difference to the federal budget, and whatever Dan says, he can say spending till he's blue in the face. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to do a little bit of both. You got to get more revenue and you got to reduce spending so that they meet in the middle.
Dan, the political will to cutting spending just has not been there in the past. I mean, it's been tried, and special interests, and there are things that just don't get touched. There's no political will to cut spending to the extent to which it needs to be cut.
Well, again, we don't actually need to cut spending, even though I would love it if they actually did. All we need to do is freeze spending,
Dan,
or at least limit its growth to 1 or 2% a year.
Dan,
that
is so. That point is
that's
so.
Exactly. Look at the numbers. The Congressional Budget Office just put out their outlook. Look at where spending is today. Look at projected revenue and say, let's hold spending to less than that, like we did in the 1990s under Bill Clinton.
Dan,
Your hero.
That is incredibly misleading.
Gentlemen, very quickly, because we've got to go.
Yes,
What should be the tax bracket? Should it be 250? Should it be 500,000? What should be the top bracket?
Well, right now the top bracket starts at about $370,000. I don't see any reason why we couldn't add another bracket at $1 million, another one at 5, another one at 10.
What do you think, Dan?
A flat tax of 15% for every American, and let's cut the heck out of government.
Wow, now we're talking.
There we go. He says it at the end of the interview.
The one thing I bet the two guys could absolutely agree on is if you were designing the tax code from the ground up, you would never come anywhere close to what we have today.